session of the virtual Inspire conference, which takes from the 3rd to the 12th of June. So we are well into the second week, and we have this morning a session on pan-European datasets, the management of them, the visualization and the dissemination. And we would like to take the opportunity, dear participants, as EEA, together with some of our partners, to present to you from various angles the way we are dealing with pan-European data sets, the way we are building them from inspired submissions, but also from other sources. And for that, we have proposed a session which has been accepted. We brought our partners together, and we are looking forward to share in the next 1.5 hours or a little bit longer the content of this session with you. We got a lot of participants. I don't see in the moment how many, but in order to make you familiar with how we are running the session, I would like to briefly show the agenda of the meeting. Please, somebody, if you do not see the same what I'm seeing, please inform me. So the session Pan-European Datasets, Management, Visualization and Dissemination is starting by a presentation by José Rubio about data flow management and the production in general. I'll come in very briefly. My name is Stefan Jensen. I'm sharing this session on behalf of the European Environment Agency. I come in with a short reference to how data which we receive from the Inspire process are contributing to this. Then we will enter into technical elements. We will learn how Inspire compliant GML are being brought forward, data from the Water Framework Directive. Our colleague Neri will do this. We have at the next presentation two, actually. We take the thematic example of the noise directive to show you how we align with Inspire. So there will be an overview provided by our colleague Daya, and then there will be a presentation on the data modeling approaches and solutions by our partners and consultants from Italy. Stefania will represent this. Last but not least, Torsten will give us some information about how efficient delivery processes these days look like. And we will, at the end of Torsten's presentation, we will run a Slido. Those of you who have been present in several meetings already know that Slido is used to different degree in these sessions. So we will be using Slido at the end of today's session, and earlier on we will use a classical chat tool which is coming with the WebEx. I will look into the chat tool together with my colleagues. We will collect your questions and bring them forward as time fits. Now, a little bit housekeeping. Many of you have seen that already. Some welcome and hints for participants. So please, all who do not speak or present, mute your microphone, turn off your video, and if you like to ask a question, raise your hand. It has turned out that it was rather practical if people write their questions into the chat, so that we are then using the chat window, and one of us here from the EEA team brings up then the question. For the Slido event, Slido you find under www.slido.do, and there you need to enter an event code, which is 2020, and we have an extra slide for that. You have also all the sessions of today listed on the first page when you get into Slido. So from that, you need to select a so-called room, and we are in the second room, which carries the title of our event. And with this, I think I have finished the introductory part, and I would ask our host, Ibolia, to open the floor for the first presentation by my colleague, José Rubio. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stefan. I think I will also start my video so people can also see me. Now I can also share my presentation. Yeah. I hope now, yeah, I hope everyone can see it, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is José Miguel Rubio. I work as a geospatial data manager at the European Environment Agency. This presentation will be a sort of a short overview of how we work on the data management and production at the European Environment Agency. Of course, in my 10, 12 minutes time, I cannot go into a lot of details, and this is a very pretty much a collective effort of many people working in this. But well, I'll try to do my best and present yeah, the main aspects of how we do the work of data management at the EEA. Just for you, for those who really don't place very well what is the role of the EA, and also to give you a context of what we do. The EA is an EU agency. We are sitting in Copenhagen in Denmark, and our main role is to provide reliable, relevant, targeted, and timely information for policymakers, and in general for the society, in order to contribute to improve the environment in Europe and also to support sustainable development. EA is an EU agency, but we also cover EFTA countries and also Turkey. But we do not work in isolation. We work in general with a very, very big network, which is called the EEA-Elonet, the European Environment Information and Observation Network, which comprises hundreds of institutions and thousands of experts in the environment and climate domain. And it's with them together where we really have to place this work because it's a pretty collaborative effort. We work in the context of what we call the MDAK chain, which stands for Monitoring Data, Information, Assessments, and Knowledge Added Value Chain. We work in all the different steps of this diagram that you can see on the slide. To a greater or a lesser extent, in the context of monitoring, it's actually more on the member state side and our EEA-Elonet partners, which provide us with the necessary observations. We also do some monitoring in the context of Copernicus Land Service. And also, of course, we collaborate with other commission partners. But then we have a very important role in the context of data collection, acquisition, processing in order to generate information, indicators that then feed in our assessments and reports, which are the evidence base that then can be used by our European Commission, partners, and general society to know more about environment and take the appropriate decisions. This presentation will be more focused on what we do. What do we do actually in the first steps? And this is why I put this diagram that you can see on the slide. This many of you may be already familiar because this comes from the fitness check on environmental monitoring and reporting. This represents the different steps in which convey, so to speak, the environmental reporting process. This is pretty much a collective effort, of course, involving member states as the ones submitting the information, but then the Commission, which in the first steps that you can see towards the left, are those, together with member states, of course, designing the intervention logic, drafting the reporting obligations, putting in implementing acts. But then it's when it has to come into practice when the EA comes into place, and this is the rectangle that you can see from steps 4 to 9 is where EA, together with the member states and also with our EEA-Elonet partners, we help in the member states to prepare the reports. We have the reporting system in place so we can collect the data. Then we have a series of processes in place so we can quality check the data that have been submitted, and then in order to then generate the pan-European datasets that are then published in different visualization tools and dissemination channels that I will mention later on. No? So this is just to explain that this is a process which we share together with the Commission, in which the EEA has an important role. And just to give you some numbers, you can see here at the on the right the different data flows, reporting data flows stemming from EU and international and also other EEA-Elonet reporting obligations that we are currently managed. Actually, yeah, the last counting, which was from last year, indicate that we manage around 100 and data flows, which is yeah, go from air quality to industrial emissions, environmental noise directive, water framework directive, which we'll speak both of about them in the next presentations. We used to also manage the Inspire monitoring and reporting until last year as well. Of course, not all the data flows have an annual frequency, or different data flows have different reporting frequencies. Some of them are continuous, like in the context of air quality. Some of them have a lesser frequency. For example, Birds and Habitats Directive, we are speaking about 6 years of yeah, difference between the different reporting periods. The next slide, if I can, yeah. Well, the process of how we manage from the country delivery of the submitted information to the generation of products could be summarized in a very simple diagram. But actually it's far more complex, as you can see in the next. This is just a BPMN data flow description of how all the different steps, of course you cannot read anything, but just to let you know that it's a pretty complex process in which we have, for each data flow, different demands. We manage different formats, definitely not only geospatial, many of them are tabular, with different deadlines, with different actors involved, because as I said as well, we collaborate with EEA-Elonet partners, with the Commission, but also sometimes with the international organizations, because there are also some reports that need to be submitted to UN institutions as well. And it has been something that have been growing organically. We didn't start with the 100 data flows when we started working at the EEA. It's something that has grown with the years. And this has also implied that we had put in place different technical solutions as it was growing naturally, so to speak. No? And as I said, it can be a very complex process, but we have our, so to speak, the cornerstone of our data flow management is ReportNet, which is a reporting system which has 20 years of experience. We have a series of components, the reporting obligation database, the data dictionary with information and code lists, definitions of XML schemas, the quality controls, and of course, the envelopes, which is where we actually yeah, store the files that the member state have submitted. With the years, of course, and with the growing number of reporting data flows that the EEA has taken, it has been put in charge of course, the system has is been now struggling with the capacities, and that's why we are working now towards establishing a new paradigm of ReportNet, which is what we call ReportNet 3.0, which I will speak a bit later on. But currently, what we do is once we have received all the different files, of course, we take into account the quantity of data sets that the files and the information that we receive. We had to put in place a process which is highly automated in order to ensure that we can fulfill the deadlines and we can deliver in time. No? So that's why we are heavily relying on ETL tools, which allows us to extract, to do some quality checks on the files that we have received, clean up, and then create a pan-European data set. It's a very successful system that we have put in place, but it's very, very heavy. We have thousands and thousands of transformation jobs that we do every day. As I said, this management of data flows is quite of an collaborative effort, and that's why we have put in place several tools, online tools that allows us allows the data stewards, data custodians at the EA, but the Commission and other EONet partners to follow what is going on with the submission, how we are doing with the processing, and also to distribute the burden, so to speak, of creating the different products, like, for example, web services. No? We have also set up in order to facilitate the analysis of the datasets that we receive and datasets that we have, geospatial datasets, images, and so on. We have also set up what we call the joint environmental data infrastructure, which is a sort of a data cube that allows us to process the geospatial information using a common grid, as you may be familiar with the data cube concept, in order to extract the statistics and indicators that then can be offered to thematic experts so they can understand what is behind the data that have been submitted and the data that we use as a base. No? As I said before, we are moving now. We are in a transition stage, so to speak, to a new paradigm in our reporting system. As I said, we are really struggling with the capacity in the current reporting system. So we are now setting up ReportNet Studio 0, which is, instead of a file-based storage, which is the ReportNet that we have now, to a record-based storage. ReportNet Studio 0 will heavily improve the user experience, will also facilitate the collaboration between the different actors in the process, try to reduce the time in between we receive the data set until from the member states until we create the pan-European data sets. Enhancing quality controls, because now, as I said, we do it after we have received the submissions. The idea is that we can, in the submission system, introduce a series of quality controls, so we can already receive a data set which has been quality proof. No? And also very important for this conference is the possibility of also using Inspire Web Services for submission. No? Also, the idea is to have dashboards and visualization tools that allows us to control without having to set it up on an ad hoc basis externally to the support submission system. No? This is something that we are almost about to launch the first operational version in summer, so we will go gradually incorporating data flows into the new system. Just I'm trying to go towards the end of my presentation. Of course, one very important element of the data flow management is the dissemination of the final product. We have several channels, the website, where there are several viewers. We can, without give the possibility of bulk download. We have, of course, Disco Map for our where we publish our web services, more for programmers rather than for the final product, for the final user, who can access the web services through different viewers that we have set up. We have also different endpoints to query the data, an SQL REST endpoint, which is called Disco Data, and a semantic data service. But I wanted to give a bit more detail of our catalog service that we set up several years ago. It's an Inspire compliant discovery service. It's a metadata catalog, which also stores a reference version of pan-European datasets that we create out of the data flows, but also datasets which are used for EA products. We used GeoNetwork as a tool for the catalog. We are supporting the GeoNetwork communities in several years, trying to support the process also towards making GeoNetwork fully Inspire compliant. And you can find there many thousands of, 1,400 datasets, because you can also find there historical versions, Copernicus land service metadata, and both public and restricted datasets. So of course, for the restricted datasets, you need to contact EA if you want to have access to them. So you have here the URL. This is also the standard endpoint that we use, that we expose to GEOS in Copernicus. And this is my last slide. We are, of course, publishing this data through several channels, but we also have different thematic portals. Noise, we will hear more later on, but also in other of the many areas that we are working in. I could not end the presentation without also mentioning Copernicus land monitoring service, because we are the entrusted entities for the pan-European and local component of Copernicus land, and we also run the web portal and, of course, the production behind the service. No? And finally, also to try to we are not all only creating products based on the typical data flow or in the context of Copernicus. We are also trying to respond ad hoc demands, and that's why we a few weeks ago, when the COVID crisis started, we created an air quality in COVID-19 viewer, which is harvesting the data from pollutant concentrations on a weekly and monthly basis from the stations across Europe. And we compare the values in 2020 against 2019 and 2018 to see the differences in pollutant concentrations due to the lockdown. Also, another nice product that we have published recently is the story map on climate change impacts, where you can find many maps which show actually the probability of climate hazards, forest fires, droughts, and other climate hazards, taking into account different greenhouse gases emissions. So I think that's a bit all what I wanted to say. I think it was a very I tried to go through all the different steps. Of course, I cannot enter into a lot of details. I hope it creates some appetite for you to contact the agency if you have any question. And of course, I can also now respond to any question that you may have. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Jose. And we already got a few questions coming in, and there are two from Wiedeke. I think we have time for them. If you can give quick answers. The first one, is a catalog also harvested through the Inspire Geo portal?
Not yet. I mean, the Inspire Geo portal is basically there for harvesting the catalogs from the member states. Of course, we have discussed with JRC, not in the context of this catalog, but in the context of the catalogs of other international organizations, how to harvest the case especially of marine catalogs, because they are holding data sets which are from the member states. But it's a question, it's a discussion that we also need to have, but it's nothing that we have yet decided upon.
Another question goes on the if the data sets EA creates if the metadata is conformant to Inspire.
I think I didn't say. Of course, the catalog is fully Inspire compliant. The metadata are fully Inspire compliant against the last technical guidance 2.0. I mean, there may be some issues in a few of the metadata files. I cannot put my hand on fire, but in principle, we have been working a lot with the UNetwork guys to make sure that these metadata are fully conformant.
Okay, I think with this, we have to stop. There is another question about Tableau. Yes, we're using a set of commercial data visualization tools, but maybe we can add into the chat also to that question.
Yes.
And the slides will be provided afterwards. I just see this question coming in. The principle is you go to the site where the whole program of the conference is announced, and at the bottom where you earlier on could register, there you're getting then later on all the presentations. So I think we move on, and I thank you very much again, Jose.
Thank you.
And I should be showing the next presentation, which I have to call onto a screen first. Just a second. Bear with me. I assume the presentation is on.
Yes.
Okay, then I move. I'd like to give you a short introduction into how we are utilizing Inspire priority datasets, and those have been coming about in the past years through a governance process, which is part of the Inspire multi-annual implementation work program. And under this program, a established called datasets, and this group has 4 different tasks, and that group has been established to prioritize and clearly identify data on which countries can focus when they are facing, let's say, the full implementation challenge of Inspire, which is rather broad on what is the environmental data and sometimes beyond, I mean, especially on Annex 1, which need to be addressed. So this group has been working with voluntary member states, and we have been coming up with a list of data sets as part of a process that was where the Commission has been identifying as a reporting fitness check the exact data sets it would require from all the European legislations. And the spatial one of those, they ended up on the list, and the list has been continuously updated and refined. Just last week, we have been sharing the version 2.1 of this list, and that is where we start from. That data which is referred to in the list is being made available by the countries through the Inspire Geoportal. This process has begun in May 2018, and I think several participants in this seminar have been involved in this. Um, Important to say is that we have put an emphasis on making the data available as is, because we wanted to have content rather than fully harmonized content, which takes us much longer. But we are also working on promoting interoperable European data models, and you will hear later on today how we have been doing this in particular areas. And then, of course, this data is being made visible and available through the EU Geoportal. Yesterday, I looked at the EU Geoportal. What is the situation? We are currently having 850 of country data sets available. So this is material, as Jose explained, material we can build on when we build pan-European data sets. But of course, we have also material coming in through ReportNet. So you see here the situation by country, and we're not going to look at that in detail. And we have also been publishing to the Inspire governance an overview of how the countries are performing. You saw a figure around 850 now, June 2020. The latest official figure, so to say, is from March, 824, 390. There were mid-2019. So you see there is progress in getting data sets to the European level here. But you also see that countries are performing differently, and the performance is also different when it comes to different thematic areas. To the right side, you can see which topics are represented, and we have quite a lot of material around the Water Framework Directive, the Floods Directive. There's air quality data, the nature directives, urban wastewater. Basically, the most mature directives which we have in the environmental legislations are the ones from which we have received so far the most information. I think that is quite a natural development. But we're seeing also this progressing, and how do these data sets look like now? Pan-European data sets, we like to distinguish into different categories, and that has been done as part of the priority dataset work. So there are clear reference data sets which are mainly built and existing on the European level, like on population, on biogeographic regions. Then there are data sets which are really reported by the countries. Some of them are mandatory, some are optional depending on the reporting obligations. Some act as a reference data set as such. And there are also a very few where only attributes are arriving or which are being produced in document form. So this is about what we get. When we go to the catalog Jose has been referring to, and that is the user side, the EEA can have a look at those data sets, and what you see is that we are utilizing around 40 of them currently already building European data sets. And this is a listing by the most popular data sets. And so we have our SDI catalog as a place where we can also record the availability of country data sets, sorry, and our possibility to build pan-European data sets, making use of them. From priority data sets to European data sets, what are the lessons we have been learning? As I've mentioned, fortunately, there is a steady growth in the way the member states are providing these priority data sets. But we have the unfortunate situation that while we have 1/3 really engaged countries who are doing extremely well, we have another third of the countries who have, let's say, a medium performance, and the last third of countries who are actually not really participating at all and not providing these data sets yet. So that is a situation which is unfortunately that needs to improve as the legislation around Inspire further unfolds. And we are hearing also about what follows the Inspire legislation these days. From the reporting side, we have fortunately a stable availability of e-reporting data sets also through ReportNet. And that is something which is available since many years, as Jose was reporting, and we can combine them in ReportNet 3 from 2021 onwards. So we're developing now the functionality in ReportNet 3, and from 21 onwards, we can, in operational data flows, make use of the Inspire harvesting and these type of deliveries. Also here, then we will be able to use this. We are a bit struggling sometimes with different approaches which are taken by the countries regarding the spatial data extent. It can be local, regional, or national. And we see also that the availability of harmonized data is slowly developing. And also we see that and it will be picked up, I think, in the more technical presentation later on, that when we get the as-is data, we get it in very many diverse formats and service types, and we are struggling with that. Even though we have a quite powerful machinery with FME and other tools, we're struggling with these formats. So data processing towards European data sets, many of the experiences Jose has already been referring to. It's a substantial task. It will be benefiting from better interoperability, which we hope will come in the future still. And it's a shared task we have on the European level. You have maybe in other seminars seen from Eurostat how they are striving to produce core data sets from submissions. So we are using these priority data sets to do rather similar work. A reflection on how this continues into the future. The priority data set is a clear building block of what is available in Europe as the next phase in terms of how we are handling data on environment, climate, and sustainability. And that has to do with the development of the green data space. And this green data space is a place where we'll find a variety of data sets. And those priority data sets are part of it. And core data, so basic foundation data is also part of it, and other data sets join in. And there's a process currently on high value data sets, which also brings in data to this data space. I use here a small graphic I saw yesterday in a seminar which was not part of the Inspire conference, where DG Connect reflects about data access and use. And there you see the environmental data. It's a bit separated from high value data set. I mean, these are things which we will be seeing how they develop. The high value data set definition is in the process. We are discussing the environmental aspects of this, and we are hoping that we're getting many of those data sets, or giving them an additional emphasis by also having them counted under the high value data sets. Altogether, this data, this is my last slide, will will help us doing our job, and the growing availability of priority datasets helps us. They are becoming a building block of the green data space, and they will be further pushed through this, we think. We have the possibility as of soon to integrate them deeper in our current reporting system through the ReportNet 3 data management procedures, so that we are able to provide more and higher quality pan-European data sets for a multitude of usages in the future. I think this should conclude my presentation. And now let me have a look at the chat if I'm getting some questions on this already by you people. Okay, if you have questions, you're free to add some. I see one from Michael Reda. Only metadata identified for Inspire monitoring will be displayed. No, it's gone in the Inspire GeoPortal. However, this does not comply with every directive. Will this be fixed? Let me see. I'm not fully clear about the questions. About the question. I'll think about it and get back to the question.
Okay, I think Stefan, maybe I
you can help, yeah?
Yeah. I get also some noise. I don't know if it's from you or from some other person. Sorry. Yeah, I think he refers to data provided by organizations, which are actually, I mean, from the member states, but international organizations are actually responsible for maintaining. Of course, this is something that we started discussing last year. We haven't yet finished the discussion, but of course we are in contact with the organizations, also via the data from the MSSP. So it's a discussion which is still ongoing.
Okay, thank you for helping out here. There are two more questions which I will answer in the chat, because I think we need to continue. And somebody is moving some cutlery or so there in front of the microphone. Please mute yourself. I would like to ask Iboria to pass to the next presenter, who is Neri, our colleague Neri. And yes, let's do that. Stop my sharing. Neri, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Could you please let me know if you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's move this aside and these two. Okay, so this will be a short presentation about the creation of Inspire compliant GML datasets for the Water Framework Directive. And the purpose of the presentation is actually to be able to put into good use all the information that has been reported by EU member states, Iceland, Norway, and the UK during the second river basin management reporting. So if you look at that screen capture now, it shows the status today of the Inspire GL portal. And you can see that with regard to the Water Framework Directive and only downloadable data sets of national scope, not all member states are already providing it. And that is actually possible if the information that is already reported, was already reported via ReportNet, is transformed into an Inspire compliant format and made available through the Inspire portal. So the point of the presentation is to try and help the national providers to achieve the status that is shown in this screen. So basically, all the priority data sets for the Water Framework Directive available via the Inspire GL portal. So to achieve that, the first thing that we need to understand here is what are the Water Framework Directive reference datasets, how to encode them in an Inspire compliant GML format, and then how to reuse that as Inspire priority datasets. And finally, how to find more information to accomplish all this. Starting with the Water Framework Directive reference datasets, and for those who are not involved in the reporting process, they are basically the ones represented here. You have river basin districts, which are the main areas of management under WFD, subunits, which are subdivisions, for example, subunits that are defined for management purposes or to apply specific measures, groundwater bodies, surface water bodies, and associated with the water bodies, the monitoring sites that are being used to monitor the existence, for example, of priority substances. All this information has already been reported by EU member states, Iceland, Norway, and the UK, and Switzerland also submits similar data sets via a separate reporting flow. The reason why these are reference data sets is because we are using them to associate descriptive information. For example, the competent authorities are linked to the river basin districts, or the chemical status and the quantitative status of water bodies are linked to the groundwater bodies. The same thing for surface water bodies with regard to the chemical status and ecological status. And of course, the monitoring sites are associated with monitoring programs for each of the relevant substances or quality elements. In other data flows, like for example, the state of environment annual data flows, we are also using this information as reference spatial units, for example, for information on water quantity, emissions, water quality, and basically that's it. Additionally, and besides the reference datasets, we also have protected areas. And for those of you who are working with Inspire, protected areas are not protected sites because the purpose is not exclusively the protection of biodiversity. So these are under the areas of management team, and they are actually reported not only under the WFD, but under other reporting flows. For example, designated waters and drinking water protection areas are reported under WFD, but the bathing waters are reported annually under the Bathing Water Directive reporting flow. Sensitive areas are reported every 2 years under the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, and the nitrate vulnerable zones are reported every 3 years under the Nitrates Directive reporting. And the status of these protected areas with regard to data models is also a bit different. For example, both the drinking water, designated water, and the bathing waters are collected using the WFD data model, but the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive sensitive areas are not collected using this model. We transform it and we publish it using the WFD data model. So what is the status quo of these reference data sets? As Jose Rubio has mentioned before, we compile them together and we actually have everything already published as a pan-European dataset. And you can see here in these screenshots, in this case, monitoring sites and groundwater bodies according to geology, and in this case here, the delineation of river basin districts and the ecological status of surface water bodies. So this information is available. It is also available as visualization services, as WMS services. And, sorry, I think I just clicked the link. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Yeah. And it's also available as files that you may download either via the spatial data infrastructure catalog at the EEA or directly via the EEA website. So all this information has already been reported by member states, is already available as consolidated pan-European datasets, which can be downloaded right now both as shapefile and GL package, and you already have visualization map services and map applications available. So the next point here is, can we reuse this and can we quickly answer the INSPIRE requirements? So there are 3 steps there. One is understanding the WFT data model, creating a mapping to INSPIRE attributes, and define some encoding principles for identifiers. For those of you who are not familiar with the WFT data models, they were defined 6 years ago now, and the purpose was to already align them with INSPIRE as to the content. So the WFT data models always have the INSPIRE core attributes, and then we identified from the optional attributes, which were the ones that were required by the WFT reporting, and some additional attributes that might be required for the state of environment reporting. So for example, for the areas of management, which basically are river basin districts, subunits, and water bodies, we have the normal, the well-known identifiers in INSPIRE, INSPIRE ID, the thematic ID, beginning lifespan, end lifespan, and we actually had to add some additional information which is not in the INSPIRE areas of management theme. This was copied, so to speak, from the statistical unit theme. And we used it because we need to have life cycle information for the WFT purposes. And additionally to this core attributes, we also need the name, the zone type, the specialized zone type. So all of these are attributes that exist already in the INSPIRE area of management team. Similarly, for the monitoring sites, we have the geometry, the INSPIRE ID, and for example, in the INSPIRE environmental monitoring facility theme, you do not have thematic identifiers, which we actually need because we could not only operate with national identifiers. We had to have a single unique identifier at European level. So here we use the thematic identifier, although it was not in the original INSPIRE theme. We kept the information about lifespan version, which again was useful, and in this case we did not have to import or to add attributes about life cycle information because these ones already existed in the environmental monitoring facility theme. Similar to the case with the areas of management, we needed additional attributes which are optional, like the feature of interest, which allows us to link each monitoring site to the water body, or the relation to monitoring sites that are used in separate data flows. The operational activity period was also necessary. The media monitored was also kept. So basically, we kept all the optional attributes that might be necessary to link the spatial data with the descriptive data. The mapping was very simple, and you can see it here. You have the INSPIRE theme, each of the elements, the name that we adopted 6 years ago for the GML files that are used in the reporting, a simplified name that we had to adopt as well, because reporters can provide or can prepare their datasets using shapefiles, so we had to obey to the constraints of a maximum number of characters for the attribute names. So it's rather easy to map the INSPIRE themes with the GML elements in the WFT information. Similarly, you have the same information here with the environmental monitoring facility themes, the link between each of the elements that you'll find in the GML and the corresponding Inspire element. So based on these mapping tables, it's rather easy to prepare the GML files. So this is the final step now, and I start by stealing a very clear explanation made by Torsten about the different types of identifiers that are used in Inspire. You have the GML ID, for example, that is used to uniquely identify the element within the current document. The Inspire ID, which you are all familiar with, and also the GML identifier, which is an optional element that should be stable over time. And this is the one for which we will be using EEA vocabularies, which provide us with a register of all the identifiers at European level. So in this example, you have the flat WFD GML. You can see that the way of encoding the features is very simple. You have the Inspire local ID, you have the thematic identifier scheme. And immediately you will notice, for example, that you have the local ID, meaning the national identifier, but you do not have the Inspire namespace. And the reason for that was that, again, nearly 6 years ago, Inspire implementation was not as advanced as it is now, and many member states did not have this attribute to provide. So this is how it looks like when the information is reported. And here you see an extract of the same information. And I would highlight these elements here, where you have, for example, for the identifier, you have a link to the EEA vocabularies online with a stable link for each of the elements. You can see here as well that we had to create, in this case using simply the country code, a template namespace where it was missing, and for the version ID you will see here simply the date when this was reported. So this is the approach that was used for encoding the information that was reported in a different format. Similarly, here for the surface water bodies, you will see, for example, that here you have the related zone identifier, which links the water body to a specific subunit. And again, this is where, when you now encode it using Inspire compliant GML, you can make use of the EEA registry to provide an href that is resolvable and that is stable over time. You can also see here that this, in this example, that we have enriched, so to say, the Inspire datasets with additional information that was not strictly required for the reporting. For example, the environmental domain, which is an attribute that is mandatory in Inspire and was not required for the reporting, or the legal basis, which is always the same for all the objects, so it was not requested during the reporting, but it is useful and necessary when you publish Inspire datasets. Finally, sorry, the encoding of the monitoring sites was one of the most more controversial for two reasons. The first one is that the theme itself does not have a thematic identifier. So although we requested it as the European identifier during the reporting, Inspire does not require it. And the second part is we always need the link to the water body. And that link to the water body, in terms of the Inspire theme, the closest semantic attribute, so to say, is the feature of interest. And the encoding of that is a bit complex, or not straightforward. So you can see here, again, the identifier that is used allow us to bypass the fact that we do not have a thematic identifier, but we are using it here in the way that we construct that link. So we can always have that, retrieve that information afterwards. And in the case of the feature of interest, this is actually encoded in the observing capabilities. So again, you can see here that you have the link to the water body.
We need to wrap up soon, Neri.
Okay, sorry, 2 more slides. So basically, if you then follow those links, you will be led to this monitoring site vocabulary, where you can have all the information regarding the links between the concepts of monitoring site, the previous codes used for the same monitoring site, or the water body that it belongs to. So basically, how does this then be reused as priority data sets? This is applicable to all the cases that, or this approach is applicable to all the cases that are highlighted here. We have demonstrated that in the reporting payload, you have things that are fit for assessments, but you already have all the information that is necessary for Inspire. So it is very simple to get this information from CDR or from your own systems and transform it and publish it in the Inspire Geo portal. Where can you find more information? I'll move through that slide before Stefan removes my microphone. You can find it here. You can download and explore the datasets. You can enrich it with additional information, and you can simply create the metadata and publish in your national geo portal so that it can be harvested and made visible in the Inspire Geo portal. And basically that's it. So
thanks a lot, Neri. That was very hands-on, and I think you really showed how we, in detail work on bringing here worlds together. There's one question, very short, from a gentleman called Andreas. What about actual measurements? Shouldn't they be included in the environmental monitoring facility theme?
So presently, the WFD reporting does not require the reporting of measurements. So that information is actually not part of the reference teams. But it is indeed an interesting suggestion that in the future that information is reported and associated with the monitoring sites.
Okay, there's another question by Michael, but this you would need to talk through the chat, Neri, if you may. And
very well.
We move to the next presentation, which is by Daria. Thanks a lot.
Yes, hello. Yes, hello, good morning. I will start sharing my presentation. Just a second, please.
It's there, very nicely visible.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Also.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. So my name is Daria Lichtenegger, and I work in the European Environment Agency, and I have been involved also in the work of alignment between the reporting obligations under the Environment and Noise Directive and the Inspire Directive. So today I will give you a brief information about the latest work on this alignment, which is prepared by the European Environment Agency and the European Commission, together in cooperation with many other partners. So first, I would like briefly reflect on environmental noise in Europe, and then continue with the information about the new reporting mechanism developed under the Environmental Noise Directive. Environmental noise remains a major environmental health problem in Europe. Environmental noise from road, rail, aircraft, and industry sources affects millions of people, causing significant public health impacts, and it has a threat to wildlife as well. Despite the progress and several successful implementation measures, Europe is not on track to meet the objective of significantly reducing noise pollution by 2020. Reducing noise pollution requires a wide cooperation and interrelations, including policy and legislative instruments adopted at the international, European Union, or national levels, scientific evidences, and implementation of appropriate measures. If we look into the activities in countries, we can see that at national, regional, or local levels, responsibility for implementing measures is distributed among many responsible authorities. For example, road, rail, airport authorities, or authorities in urban areas or cities. Essential tools, for example, like strategic noise mappings and action planning, depend also on diverse detailed data, including geospatial data, but also on modeling and analytical tools. And the latest amendment of the Environmental Noise Directive sets a digital information exchange mechanism that can also benefit from other infrastructures such as ReportNet and Inspire. Three main legislative instruments are used in preparation of the new Environmental Noise Directive reporting mechanism. The Environmental Noise Directive is the primary legislative tool for achieving noise reduction and also defines the essential elements of the reporting obligations. For example, the reporting of strategic noise maps and action plans is scheduled in a 5-year cycle. The Inspire Directive aims to create a European Union spatial data infrastructure which will enable the sharing of environmental spatial information. The roadmap for the implementation of this directive is almost concluded, with the last deadlines in 2020 and next year in 2021. The latest regulation, so-called sometimes streamlining regulation, is the regulation on the alignment of reporting obligations in the field of legislation related to the environment. And with this regulation, which amends several other environmental-related directives, this regulation connects both directives, the Environmental Noise Directive and Inspire Directive. It amends the Environmental Noise Directive by requiring data availability and dissemination according to the Inspire Directive. Especially this is focused on strategic noise maps and summaries of action plans. So let's start a bit at the beginning with understanding the content required for the reporting and conceptual context of the new Environmental Noise Directive data model, reporting data model that is aligned with Inspire data specification requirements. The complete harmonized reporting data model includes all reporting data flows. It is composed of sub-data models that represent requested data within each of these data flows and interrelationships between them. It builds on already agreed data concepts that have been reported in previous reporting cycle. So the development of this conceptual data model doesn't start from scratch, but relies on good practices from previous and agreed content from previous reporting cycle. Therefore, the main new elements are spatial information, provided according to the Inspire specifications, and agreed vocabularies which replace data previously reported in the form of a free text. With this new E&D reporting mechanism, we aim at reducing data gaps and increasing data comparability, completeness, and also usability for different assessments and analyses. The first reporting data flow that is scheduled for 2022, and it will be related to strategic noise maps reporting. And it is foreseen that it will be implemented in the new modernized ReportNet 3.0 reporting infrastructure. So how was the mapping between the spatial information requirements for the purpose of E&D reporting and Inspire? How does these two elements fit together? The identified requirements for spatial information for the Environmental Noise Directive reporting purpose were first evaluated against the scope of the Inspire spatial data teams, and in the second step, with detailed Inspire application schemas and spatial object types. This evaluation included segmenting and format mapping and established overlaps between both requirements, but also extensions which are needed for the E&D reporting purpose where necessary. For example, The major sources of noise related to transport, roads, railways, and airports are mapped to the Inspire Transport Network Spatial Data Team. Here, it is important to mention that datasets of major noise sources that are required to be reported represent only a selection of roads, railways, or airports that reach the threshold of annual traffic flow defined by the E&D. So the reporting dataset indeed represents only a subset or a selection of some of those roads, railways, and airports. The Inspire Area Management Restriction Regulation Zones and Reporting Unit Special Data Team covers a wide scope of areas in different environmental domains that are managed or regulated to reach specific objectives. And this special data team, Inspire Special Data Team, can of course be used also to map requirements for special data in E&D reporting. So in the E&D data model, agglomerations, quiet areas, and areas of noise action plans are modeled on the basis of the Inspire Area Management data model, but all of them, of course, include additional specific information for each of these special information. Strategic noise maps contour noise contours, including noise levels, correspond with the scope of the Inspire Human Health Special Data Team. A specific Inspire special object type for environmental health determinant measure is used for this purpose. And additionally, we included very precise code lists that are defined to describe noise sources, noise indicators, and noise levels for the E&D reporting purpose. We included also some other ways, another way to include include special units. And we included common special units also in the data models of strategic noise maps exposure data and noise control programs. By using the reference territorial units for statistics, shortly named NUTS, and local administrative units, those special units can be reported by unique identifiers and not directly by special information, because the special information will be obtained from the pan-European data set of NUTS and local administrative units, both provided by Eurostat. So briefly, this is a very short overview of the mapping, of the top-level mapping of special information between the noise directive and the Inspire directive, and more details about the data modeling approaches and examples of encodings will be provided in other presentations. So I would like to use this opportunity to thank to all the partners who are still involved in this development. We almost concluded the data model development and the documentation. It will be available, let's say, in July. And we will continue working on the encoding examples, but all this development is done in a view that the reporting will indeed happen inside the ReportNet 3.0 infrastructure. So you are invited to send us more information if you are interested in this work. Please contact us at the European Environment Agency, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Daya, for this presentation on how we are dealing with this really complexity which there is in the noise reporting. And I think the strategic noise maps are only the first step, and there is a lot more to come. So, but this topic is not finished yet. Stefania will add another layer, and I think we take the questions after Stefania's presentation, right? Stefania, are you having the possibility to share your screen?
Are you able to see it?
Not yet. It's still on Daya. Here we come. There's a waterfall
Yeah,
and a
okay.
bridge.
So you
And
should
there's
get
the presentation.
Okay.
And if you move a little bit closer to the microphone, I think we would hear you better.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes, and maybe a little bit closer still.
Okay. Okay. So also from my side. So I'm Stefania Morone. I work for Epsilon Italia, and I'm supporting the European Environment Agency on let's say, Inspire-related matters, and in this case, on the development of environmental noise directive report.
Sorry, Stefania, you're still a little bit shallow in terms of how the voice can be understood. Can you be a bit closer to the mic?
Would it be, is it better now? Okay, so I'm Stefania Morrone. Okay, I work for Epsilon Italia. I'm supporting the agency on data modeling of and directive. So in the next minute, I will give an overview of approaches taken to benefit from Inspire achievements in the end modeling task, in the designing of the spatial data flows as Inspire extended data models, on which we created simplified views to help reporters identify the information pieces required from their side to avoid dealing with data model complexity. And we benefited from Inspire also in the creation of unique identifiers for the end, and reuse of Inspire simplified data structures. And for this, we built on Inspire alternative encodings work or proposal, and in particular on geopackage formats. So let's dive in the data modeling picture here. The environmental noise directive reporting requires spatial data, so the noise sources in the agglomeration and major sources outside the agglomerations, areas covered by noise action plans and quiet areas, noise contour maps, as well as tabular data, so competent authorities details and exposure data in the strategic noise map, noise control programs, and so on. So spatial data is clearly data related to the environment, to environmental noise determinant in this case. So as such, falls under the Inspire obligation. It's a priority data set, and spatial data flows are indeed priority data set. So reusing the data models from Inspire sounded like a good choice, also to avoid duplication efforts from the member states. And you will see what we extended and how in the next slides, in the next minutes. And in addition, the new model for the end reporting provides the ability for major sources, spatial objects, to link to reference dataset already provided under Inspire. And this could be a link to a metadata file in the GeoPortal, to a download service to get the entire dataset, and if possible, also specific spatial objects, or make reference to specific spatial objects in specific datasets. So next data model dilemma we had to face: how to make the specific entities in the model referenceable from other entities in the same data flows, but also in other data flows, and also from outside the end reporting. So what kind of identifier would be used? And of course, not just for the spatial entities, because this is related also to the tabular data, so the overall data model. And we decided to reuse the thematic identifier data structure from Inspire, because this data type is defined to uniquely identify the spatial objects within a particular information domain, and in this case is of course, the environmental noise directive domain. And in the same way, we decided to reuse inspired data structures to model information needs common to different data flows. For example, geographical name types and legislation citation. And in this in modeling this, we considered the work done under the Inspire alternative encoding action and reused simplified structure. And you will see that we also reused the concept of alternative encoding. For the sake of completeness, I would mention here that we also referenced in Inspire, as Daria just said, other spatial entities directly making reference to identifiers, so not including geometries, in the strategic noise map data flows and in the noise control program. So we said that derived the and spatial data flows as Inspire extended data models. So how did we derive it? We just used what Inspire already says about that. So how to create Inspire extended data models. And there is the Inspire generic conceptual model that provides a common framework for drafting of data specification, but contains an informal annex that describes how to create an extension to an Inspire application scheme. So indeed, it's more to be considered as a baseline, some kind of minimum requirements that any Inspire extension needs to fulfill. So mostly, we can summarize what is required, saying that extension does not have to change anything in the Inspire data specification. So we have to take the Inspire data specification as a whole with all its requirements, and the extension does not add a requirement that breaks any requirements of the Inspire data specification. So these are the basic rules, and we strictly stick to that. So what extension methodology did we use? And in this, we referenced the Inspire data specification extension projects. And it is a project that collects, documents, let's say, best practices for extending Inspire data model. And what's interesting that it provides common extension approaches in the form of a pattern catalog. And so in the slide here on your left, extension patterns we have been reusing are inheritance, code list extensions, and constraint addition. So what we did is to create our end specific schemas from Inspire extended schemas, and in these schemas, the feature types, so the types that contains the geometries are derived from inheritance of Inspire feature types. And then we added new code lists or extended Inspire code lists and added a few constraints that are more restricted if compared to the Inspire ones. So we did not break any pre-existent requirements in Inspire. And also, each specific data model extends only one Inspire data model. Giving a little bit more details, of course, this I can focus here only on main concepts. So what we did, how we did, and if possible, the rationale behind our choices. So extended schemas here for major sources, so major road source and major railway source, we extended the transport network schemas, more specifically the road transport network for, of course, major road source. And the feature types involved here is the road link among the different available in the Inspire data model. Likewise, the major railway source extends transport networks and the railway links link feature type. Whilst different data flows extend administrative units that it's not administrative units, it's area management. So there is a mistake here, it's area management. Area management data team and management restriction or regulations on feature types. And is, of course, the agglomeration source and noise action plans for both for the agglomerations and major sources and the quiet areas. Then human health and safety data models, and that is being extended in the context of noise contours provision. In this case, we very quick details on that. We had presented an implementing rule change proposal, so INSPIRE implementing rules change proposal, because in this case, the measure of the determinant, which in this case is the noise determinant, is not characterized by a single value as currently foreseen in the INSPIRE data model, but it is provided by means of measure categories. For example, noise level in a certain area, so in a specific noise contour, is provided by means of a dB range, for example, let's say 50 to 54, relating to a specific sound level indicator, L10 or L-night. So our proposal is to include the possibilities of provide categories of noise range directly in INSPIRE core data model. And there was also the need to provide a bug fix for the current application schema, in which the environmental health determinant measure spatial object does not allow specifying the noise source, though this is foreseen in the implementing rule. So it was just a bug fixing. So I said that we, from a technical point of view, we extended application schemas, INSPIRE application schema, importing relevant INSPIRE application schema in end schemas. So all INSPIRE attributes are available to a possible mapping when using directly the XST of the end schemas. However, not all the elements in the INSPIRE data models are relevant to the end reporting purposes. So simplified views were created.
Can you aim to close in about 2 minutes, Stefania?
Yes, this is, we have just 2 slides. So simplified views were created to hide the complexity of the data model from reporters and ensure that they could have a clear picture of what to provide and how to provide. So focus is in this streamlined view. So in the left, you see the full view of the data model with the INSPIRE feature type in gray, and in light blue, what we extended. So adding new attributes to cater for end specific requirements and adding constraints, for example, on specialized zone type. And on the right, you can see the streamlined view on this data model. That focus on end domain specific requirements and on pieces of information from INSPIRE models that are relevant to the end purposes, and includes as well mandatory elements from INSPIRE models that are irrelevant to the end purposes, but however useful for user outside of noise domain to easily discover, reuse, structure noise spatial information. And we also provide, this is important, default or recommended values for INSPIRE attributes. For example, the zone type, we saw that zone type is also used, for example, in WFD reporting. So in this case, there's a noise restriction zone, which is the environmental domain, and so on, and how to use the identifiers, so from the thematic identifier, and also how to map, if possible, the INSPIRE local ID, and so on. So I have already said that we reuse the concept of INSPIRE thematic identifiers. We defined an identifier scheme that is the common identifier scheme for thematic identifiers of the end, that is the EU code. and the identifier, which is the unique code for identification of specific objects in the end domain, not just spatial objects, but also tabular. In this box, you see, for example, that the competent authorities, so the quiet areas, competent authority as competent authority identifier, but also refers to the quiet area identifier, or the agglomeration refers to the agglomeration identifier, and so on. So last slide, we built on Inspire alternative encoding proposal, because the creation and consumption of Inspire data is not so straightforward. And this mainly because of complex nested data structures that are difficult to map and to consume with existing applications, so GIS tool libraries, web application, at least off the shelf. So there was action on that is named Inspire Alternative Encodings, investigating a more user-friendly and ready-to-use solution for efficient consumption of Inspire data. So in this context, there were developed generic rules and approaches for simplifying Inspire data models, so common simplification rules, which are common to different encodings, and also encoding specific transformation rules. So for the GeoJSON encoding, for the GeoPackage encoding, and we make use of this simplified data structure in the overall data modeling. So for spatial data, but also for thematic data. So simple geographical name, for example, simple citation. But you will learn more on this. And of course, GeoPackage delivery is based on Stimuli View, the next presentation. So that's all from my side. So
thanks a lot, Stefania. Thanks a lot. We need to push a bit the accelerator here and not to stress Torsten, though. Who is next? Torsten, can you please take the screen? And as I wrote to you all into the chat, please bear with us if you can until 11:45. And we aim to hear Torsten rounding off with a presentation about the tools and technologies, and then if we only can have a few Slido questions on top. Let's see if this letter works out. Torsten? Oh. Hey, there he comes.
Okay, now there was a screen sharing has stopped message. I don't know why. Okay, so let's start. Yeah, I'm all that's between the end of the session and lunch, so let's get these things wrapped up.
Don't worry.
Yeah, no. Okay, so yeah, basically what I want to do is to tell you that we don't just do all the modelization exercises, but rather we want to really also test how will the delivery work, and can the data that we are generating really be processed and consumed in the way that we think it can be. And so for that reason, we're looking at several options, in particular in the context of the END. Naturally, there's a few that we all know well. There's the Inspire default encoding, GML, which is well suited, especially for production, consumption, and backend systems. It's suitable for high precision geometries, like you have the option to have 2D and 3D spatial reference systems and so on. And you can also losslessly encode even very complex models with lots of associations and so on. But it's also not really suited well for direct usage in desktop GIS, and also not for web or mobile applications, in particular when there's a critical performance limit. So yeah, if we want to use GML, then that's certainly more for the kind of systems data exchange, but also for compliance testing, because there we have a huge stack of tools available that build on top of the GML encoding. Compared to that, we have GeoPackage, which is really well suited for consumption in desktop GIS. So it's kind of the open cousin to file geodatabase and the like. And really, I have been hitting very few problems with consuming packages consumed to other formats. So it's really nice to work with that. It's particularly well suited for delivering entire data sets, which many experts tend to want. So they don't want to get just 1 to 5 features from some WFS, but rather the whole thing. And it also works very well with large data sets, so several gigabytes. What it's not so well suited for is if you have to deliver very small sets of features, because for that there's quite a bit of overhead and there are fewer validation and QA tools. So basically we decided to evaluate both because both have their use cases where they make sense, with the objective of really finding out whether the reporting data flow using this encoding will work end to end, what kind of difficulties there are going to be in creating all the required artifacts, the data sets, and then also consuming and using them in different clients. We did that for 3 of the data sets that are relevant in END in the first project, and we're now working on some additional ones. Yeah, the input, on the one hand, that was the streamlined models. On the other hand, for the GML encoding, we also used the full model like displayed here. So there, the objective was basically to just create from the enterprise architect model that we were given with the minimum effort, the GML application schemas. I actually decided to use a tool that also came from the project that Stefania just mentioned, which was this Inspire extensions project about how to use all these nice building blocks that Inspire provided in terms of types, schemas, and code lists when you're building new schemas. And back at that point, it became clear that it's technically not that easy. So we had decided to implement a quick web tool as part of Hail Connect schema tools that enables you to very quickly implement these patterns that Stefania just mentioned as an extension of Inspire, and then export that to various forms and schemas. For the geo-package templates, we approached this a bit different. So there is a work in progress geo-package, UML to geo-package encoding rule for Inspire data, which is still changing quite a bit and for which the tooling was unfortunately not yet available at the time where we did that. So we tried to align ourselves as much as possible to that. But in the end, there were also a few places where the approach that we took in creating the geo-package templates is still diverting a bit from that. Yeah, and the way that we created them technically was actually to use Hail Studio's internal meta model definition, the so-called Hail schema definitions, because Hail Studio has now also gained geo-package read and write capability, and thus we could really control different ways of how we write the geo-package and then experiment with that in downstream applications, like how exactly do we encode various numeric, string, etc. fields to optimize usability. That's kind of a manual process. So you have to go through creating a JSON file like this one, where you define a type and add some constraints and add the properties that it has and so on. So in the long term, naturally, we want to solve this in a different way, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But first, I want to also say a little bit about our experiences in actually creating these test data sets. So yeah, as mentioned before, we used Hail Studio 4.0 to create both the GML and the geo-package test data sets from various sources. So be it shapefiles or file databases. I think we had mostly Austrian data. And typically what we would do is that I would create a test data set complying to one version of the schema. Then we would get feedback on whether that schema makes sense like that, maybe make some modifications. In one case, there were also still changes to the conceptual model to be taken into account. So typically for each of the test data sets, like major road source, major agglomeration source, and so on, we iterated something like 4 to 5 times so that we really knew that the outcome, the data outcome makes sense and is easy to use and doesn't have any problems. Like, for example, one of the issues we actually hit was I originally worked under the assumption that in ArcGIS, I could use field names of up to 63 characters, but it turned out it's just 31. So we had to make sure that some of our attribute names are actually shorter than 31 characters. And yeah, so those are the things that you find out by really doing an end-to-end testing with actual data. Yeah. I showed this particular slide yesterday as well. Just want to kind of focus again on that. So given that these different data sets are used for encodings, are used for different purposes, you can also expect quite different performance and size characteristica. But for delivering a whole data set, geo-package is actually reasonably effective. If you zip it, there's basically no difference. So it's always normalized to shapefile. Should mention that because yesterday it led to some confusion. And yeah, as you can see, basically performance of shapefile is somewhere in the middle field. But when you use a specialized format like flat GeoBuff, which is really optimized for performance, you get much faster number. But GeoPackage is also very good already. So it should really be both from a functional viewpoint and also from a performance viewpoint really work well for the intended use cases. Yeah, so what this means to me is that basically we can treat Inspire GML as a kind of middleware format. Yeah, it's the harmonized data that we create once, but then, and this was kind of a recurring theme in the presentations before as well, for client access, we actually create a view on that. We use the streamlined model with an encoding that's really well suited for the use case. And then this data is really fully usable and useful. Yeah, from my perspective, the next step that we would like to do is to actually integrate the model transformations into HAIL Studio. So instead of having to kind of manually deal with the schema definition, so I basically hand applied the model transformation rules there. We want to do that automatically so that all the model transformation rules developed across the different alternative encodings can actually be implemented as a writer configuration step. So you can pick which of the rules to apply, and they will be applied independently of the encoding actually. So you can use the same rules on GML, on GeoPackage, on GeoJSON, on whatever. However, this is a point where there's still some funding required. So if that's of interest to you, just reach out to us, please. Yeah, final step. The work on the GeoPackage encoding guidelines for END data is actually still ongoing. There are a few points where I want to closer align what we've been doing to the ongoing work by UNISA on the UML to GeoPackage encoding rule. Maybe also give some feedback to them about things to change, like for example, the accessibility of the normal metadata table of GeoPackage is limited. And that might be something that has to be taken into account when putting stuff there. We also want to do some usage optimizations to our schema, like actually factoring out the nil reason attribute values from the normal tables into an extra table. And yeah, as I mentioned, there should be a more general process to create GeoPackage templates, either by being able to use the UNISA tools, which are not yet released, or by doing the model transformation approach that I described. Yeah, I think to summarize, GeoPackage and GML both work without any problems to capture END data, either using the more fully fledged models or the streamlined views, but naturally they are optimal for different usage scenarios. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I hope it wasn't too kind of strung out now. So if there's any, yeah.
Thank you. You professionally made it crisp and short, and I think you may have some benefits from us using the Slido also. So there's only one question. Thank you very much, Thorsten. There's only one question for you here, which is there while Daya prepares the Slido, is there any option to convert data to GeoPackage and GML via HAIL Studio directly from the database, for example, Oracle, not exporting first to shapefiles or file view database?
Yes, so out of the box, HAIL Studio supports Access, SQL Server, Postgres, and MySQL. For Oracle support, you actually need to have the so-called Pro plugin. So that's a part of the HAIL Studio Pro subscriptions that we offer. But for all other common database types, yeah, you can basically get started out of the box.
Okay, thank you, Thorsten. Daya, are you able to launch the Slido?
Yes, please, if you give me the presenter role, I will do this
Yes.
now. Thank you. Just a second.
Oh, yes. We have prepared 3 questions, which Daya will run you through briefly.
So this is the first question, and it combines a little bit information about tools and experiences. So please, you're very welcome to go through them and try to answer. You can have multiple choice. You can answer everything what you think is is actually relevant for this, please. I will also open results view. Okay.
So we're learning that, it first looked like it was a really new field for most participants, but I think it's a bit of more of a mixed picture.
Okay, maybe I can move to the next. Thank you very much for
Yeah, just as a
your
short
feedback.
summary, or shall we go afterwards to summarize? Yeah. Go to the next first.
Yeah, I will launch the next question. What is your experience with GeoPackage? Have you used GeoPackage already? And in which context? So let's look into the results.
So I think we can conclude already that GeoPackage is still fairly new for people. For sure not in the production phase.
Yeah, not yet.
It has been used.
Okay, maybe we can start with the third question. How would you prefer to deliver, for example, reporting geospatial data? And you can select all the formats you are familiar with or you think might be interesting or relevant in the future. Oh, let's see a bit of results.
Okay, I think just to step to conclusions already and Daya step in as well. I mean, the answers here show that GeoPackage starts kicking in, but I mean, shapefile GML still are out there to be used, and it shows also the limits of GML, and I mean, most of you will be aware that we are from the Inspire coordination together with the countries, we opening up to more flexibility in these reporting formats. So I think that is also kind of nicely confirmed by this. And I think we got around 50 answers to each of the questions. So Daya, if you want to jump back to the answers on number one. And thanks. Yeah, I think you have a special conclusion, Daya, you want to share?
No, it's actually interesting to see that we have probably a very mixed audience here. Those who are already working with inspired data models and data transformation, and others who are maybe just stepping into this work. So it is interesting to see. But it's good to see that there is there are testing phases as well, that even in the reporting, environmental reporting, this is coming more and more into place. And what they use as a software to design this, that they use off-the-shelf software as well for this. Okay, so maybe this one I need to check a little bit this Slido question. Yeah.
But I think we leave it with this. Maybe you jump to number 3 still. Maybe we got some more on that one as well. But else, I would also already like to start concluding by, first of all, so on number 2, we still see that it's not really in production yet by many, only 14%, which is a handful of people plus 2, 7 people or so answered that. So I would like to thank all the presenters from EEA, from Epsilon, and Thorsten from WeTransform for coming in and sharing the experience. I hope we were able to present you various aspects of challenges we have in producing European pan-European data sets. And I thanks to the audience who to a good degree stayed on to the end. I was checking a bit the participants window here. So Daya brings us back to the last question here. How would you prefer to deliver? And okay, I think there is a certain growth in the geo package. Let's see what the coming technologies are which complement this. But I think with this we thank all of you, and we get a few friendly comments here to wave us farewell, and we wish you all a good remaining day. Attend many more of the Inspire seminars when you have the time and sessions until Friday, and enjoy your lunch, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Wish you a nice day.
Bye.